of 2008 in order for the worst parts of the recession to begin to be felt, and it was in March of 2009 when things were at their worst. That's a period of about 15 months in order for the recession to hit rock bottom. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though we may not experience an economic downturn in the next few weeks, we will almost certainly experience some sort of negative consequences in the next 24 months. So the Great Recession might not be the best comparison for what we're going through today, because that was caused by a combination of banks, insurance companies, and investors that created massive flaws in the financial system. The most comparable economic downturn to the one that we are seeing today was probably the recession of 2001, except the one that we're going through today is on a much larger scale. You see, in 2001, there was a rapid drop in stock prices after a half-decade-long bull market. There was also a crisis that slowed down the world's economy, which was 9/11, and there was a temporary ban on air travel in many countries throughout the world. Now, these aren't the exact same as to what we're seeing today, but it is the most comparable recession in terms of causes. And in 2001, what we saw is that the effects of the recession caused an 8-month economic downturn and doubled the unemployment rate to about 6%. But again, the thing is that what we're seeing today is much more extreme than what we saw back then, because today we are seeing many more negative economic indicators. For example, today consumer debt is at a higher level than it was during the recession of even 2008, meaning that any economic downturn might cause people to miss payments on their debt and in turn create massive losses for lenders, similar to what happened in 2008. Today, stock market volatility, which is usually a sign of investors being uncertain about an incoming economic collapse, is actually at the exact same level as it was right before the 2008 recession, which was extremely high. There are also two giant industries right now in the airlines and the cruise lines that are actually on the brink of bankruptcy, and no one is really talking about this. In fact, I'm almost certain that if people aren't able to travel again in the next few weeks or couple months, then we will see at least one major airline go bankrupt or get bailed out. In fact, it might even be all of them. And what is strange is that this might be one of the only bailouts that I've 100% agreed with, because it's due to an unpredictable change in traveling laws and regulations and not due to the incompetence of the industry. In fact, if you want...
The hell? I have no idea what just happened. I'll try to put it back on. Do you see what a difference just 2 days make? Crazy. Here we go.
And because of this downturn in air travel, there have been spokespeople like Christoph Hannibal, who represents Air Transat, who have said, "We are currently assessing the impact on our operations and expect the government to help airlines and travel companies weather these extraordinary circumstances." And as I mentioned earlier, the airline industry is not the only industry getting hit right now. Of course, you probably heard about a lot of the other shutdowns, like the businesses that involve large gatherings of groups of people. These are the businesses like the NBA, NHL, MLB, MLS, concerts, comedy shows, conferences, and much more. And even though each one of these businesses is much smaller than some of the bigger industries that we've already talked about, having all of these industries take a hit at the same time will begin to add up in ways that you don't think about. I mean, for example, have you thought about the economic impact of shutting down the NBA? You might think that the only people who will get hurt are the players, the owners, maybe the broadcasters, but that isn't true. Because the people that will be most affected are the arena workers who are expecting to have a stable weekly paycheck, but all of a sudden have no source of income. Now, luckily, many NBA players and owners have offered to give some help to the arena workers by funding them until the NBA comes back. But the point here is that every single shutdown of a business will likely have an economic impact that most people aren't thinking of. And yes, there's even different kinds of companies that don't draw in large or dense crowds that are still shutting down for several weeks at a time. The best two examples are Nike and Apple, who have shut down all of their stores in hopes to stop the spread of the virus throughout the world. And even though these are big companies that will be able to get through the shutdown while still being able to pay all of its workers, there are still many businesses who are shutting down temporarily or who are limiting store hours who will be unable to pay their hourly workers their expected wage. And what about the stores and small businesses that do keep their doors open during this time? Well, this early data is pretty terrifying. Let's take the restaurant business, for example. So there are apps like Resy and OpenTable which are used to book tables at restaurants, and they're reporting that covers are down between 30 and 65% in areas like New York and Washington. And this one really hurts me personally because picture all of the mom and pop local restaurants and businesses that are just being able to get by and pay the bills, and all of a sudden this disease outbreak happens and they might go out of business because everyone is staying at home. So all of these points represent the case for an incoming recession. And there's a ton of other points that are tough to quantify, such as businesses losing productivity by having people work from home. There was a sharp drop in oil prices recently too. And there's a ton of other economic indicators that signal a really bad economy coming in the future. But this does not mean that a horrible recession is for sure coming. You see, there are ways to at least mitigate some of the short-term consequences of a recession. For example, one action that several countries have done, like Canada and the United States, is that they have set up a loan program where small business owners are able to take out interest-free loans in hopes to prevent their businesses from shutting down during the next 6 to 12 months. Another thing is, as mentioned earlier, using taxpayer money to help bail out core infrastructure companies such as airlines might help prevent large companies from going bankrupt. Now, I'm not saying to bail out every single large company, but core infrastructure ones, there's a good debate for actually doing that. Another tactic, for whatever reason that no one has mentioned so far, is the Federal Reserve is lending out $1.5 trillion. Yes, that was a trillion with a T. They're lending this money out to Wall Street and the big banks. Now, there is a complex reasoning behind this called the repo market, and that would take an entire video to explain properly, but here's a quick overview. The United States banks have taken out $1.5 trillion worth of loans in order to help get them through tough economic times where treasuries are less liquid. It's essentially a loan to help stabilize the market. Now, if the market does stabilize with this injection, that's a good thing, so the banks and market might not collapse. But if the market does not stabilize with this injection, all of a sudden, you will see a giant collapse on Wall Street, which was what happened in 2008. And if that didn't worry you enough, this method of lending to banks is kind of viewed as the last resort to help stabilize a market and prevent a collapse. Now, lastly, another thing that is done virtually every time there's an economic slowdown is a reduction in interest rates. This is a very simple way to make debt cheaper in hopes of promoting spending that will kickstart the economy. And typically what you see is that when times are going to be good, interest rates go up. And when times are going to be bad, interest rates go down. Now, initially when I recorded this video, I talked about how the Federal Reserve just did an emergency rate cut down to 1.25%. But in the last few minutes, they just did another emergency rate cut down to essentially 0%. That is something that you only saw during the deepest parts of the 2008 recession. And so when I initially recorded this, I was going to say that they didn't want to lower it down to 0% because they wanted to have one more bullet in the chamber to potentially help out the economy when things start to get really bad. But now they just used that last bullet unless they want to go to negative interest rates, which I don't know if they do. But wow, I can't believe that happened while recording this video. And even though these measures might help prevent some companies from going out of business or having to do mass layoffs, the one thing that can't be prevented is the slowdown of the economy that we have already experienced in the last few weeks. And this will likely continue for the foreseeable future. You see, governmental action can only get you so far during a recession. At the end of the day, the only real way that we can prevent or minimize this recession is to have life return, well, back to normal for the average person. But that might not happen for quite a while. So buckle up, be prepared, because we might be in for a tough one. Now, I have a whole playlist of business documentaries just...
Capital One is...
This is a graph of the unemployment rate. During this economic collapse, we have seen people lose their businesses, their jobs, and even their life savings. In fact, since the collapse started just a few weeks ago, searches for unemployment applications on Google have increased by roughly 4,700%. And just last week alone, 6.65 million people in the United States filed for unemployment. That's about 2% of the United States' entire population filing for unemployment in 1 week. And to put that in perspective, only about 155 million people are in the workforce in the United States, meaning that last week alone will hike the unemployment rate by about 4.2%. This means that we have likely already surpassed the unemployment levels of the worst parts of the 2008 financial crisis. Yet, despite all of this doom and gloom, there have been some people that have been able to take advantage of this situation. In fact, many millionaires, multimillionaires, and even billionaires might be being created right in front of our very eyes. So, who are these people? And could you do anything right now to help bolster your financial future? Well, let's start off by asking ourselves, why do some businesses go through a boom during a crisis? A perfect example of this is actually McDonald's during the financial crisis of 2008. You see, during those years of 2008 and 2009, as businesses were collapsing, unemployment was nearing 10%, and millions of people were losing their jobs, McDonald's actually saw an increase in revenue and profits by about 4.5% per year. So why did this happen? Well, think about it. When millions of people have their incomes drastically reduced, they look for ways to cut costs in order to survive, one of which is food. And in 2008, McDonald's had a pretty long list of items on its dollar menu, meaning that it was cheaper in many cases for a family to go and buy food from McDonald's for just a few dollars than it was to get fresh food from a grocery store. And this is just one example of a business that was in the right place at the right time that took advantage of a recession. But today is a completely different economy than it was 12 years ago. In 2008, only about 22% of the world was regularly on the internet. Meanwhile, about 60% of the people today in the world are regularly on the internet. And this giant shift towards the internet has led to an explosion of online industries like e-commerce and social media. And that brings us to the first business that has been going through a boom recently, and that is the business of online content creators. Because of the global lockdowns, more people are being forced to stay home and try to entertain themselves. So, many of these people are turning to platforms like Netflix, Disney+, YouTube, and other streaming services in order to kill the time. And the results so far have been staggering. A recent Nielsen report showed that streaming on these platforms has spiked by over 22% since the lockdowns were implemented. And that's one of the reasons why content creators like myself and many other influencers have actually seen substantial increases in viewership, subscriber counts, and revenue during this time, as opposed to many other businesses that are seeing decreases across the board. Actually, there are some genres of online content creation that are seeing 50%, 100%, or even up to 500% increases in revenue since the lockdowns. And YouTube has said that those videos are the ones that usually come in the genres of home meditation, cooking, home workouts, and DIY videos. So this is largely content that is relating to things that people can do at home. And depending on the creator, this might mean an extra few $100s a month to tens of thousands of dollars in additional revenue per month. And out of all of the industries that I mentioned in this video, I can guarantee you that this crisis will create more wealth in the social media space than it will for most other industries. And what's crazy is that there has been such an influx of online viewership that the largest online video companies like Amazon, YouTube, Netflix, and Disney have all agreed to reduce the bit rates on their platforms in order to make sure that their websites and applications don't slow down or crash. Now, another industry that has seen a massive boom in recent weeks is the gaming industry. Similar to why online video content is taking off, people are at home a lot more now and looking for ways to entertain themselves. So, what better way to do that than to dive into a video game? Recently, Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg made a statement saying that gaming traffic across the Verizon network has increased by roughly 75% in the last 3 weeks. So just over the last 3 weeks, this crisis has single-handedly launched the careers of many smaller indie game studios. And we've seen this on places like Steam. Steam, which is arguably the largest video game marketplace on the internet, has smashed its single-day user record twice in the past 3 weeks alone. Before the pandemic, Steam's all-time user record was a hefty 18.8 million users. Then, on March 15th, they set a new record of 20.3 million users, and just recently they cracked 23.8 million users. So right now, there are millions of more gamers on this one single marketplace that are buying and downloading more games than there were just 4 weeks ago. This spike in popularity of video games has caused other companies to also ride the wave of esports and video games during this crisis as well. For example, ESPN has recently made a massive shift towards airing esports content. For example, they announced that they will begin airing a live broadcast where NBA players will be competing in a live NBA 2K20 tournament where the grand prize will be $100,000. And this won't be airing on ESPN 6 or 7. This will be airing on ESPN and ESPN2 at the primetime 7 p.m. slot, which is usually reserved for the biggest sporting event of the night. What a crazy time we're living in. Now, as you might have heard from my previous videos, one of the hardest hit industries by this crisis has been the restaurant industry. This is due to the fact that even though many restaurants still remain open, they can no longer have people sit in their restaurant because it is considered too large of a public gathering. So many restaurants have had to adapt to this crisis by using a delivery service. And this is a smart idea because just by looking at Google Trends, you can see that the term delivery has seen an unprecedented spike over the last few weeks, while the term restaurant has seen a massive collapse. In fact, the delivery business has seen such a spike that delivery companies are amongst the only companies in the world that are looking to hire more employees right now and expand. Some examples of this are Instacart, who is looking to hire 300,000 drivers over the next 3 months. There's also pizza companies like Pizza Hut and Papa John's who are looking to hire tens of thousands of delivery drivers. And of course, there is Amazon, who is looking to hire 100,000 warehouse workers and drivers over the next several months. Now, as I was doing research for this video, I was looking over what these industries, like social media, gaming, and delivery, all have in common. One of which is that these are just by chance the industries that I have been heavily involved in over the last 4 years, as many of you longtime subscribers may have noticed. So times have luckily been pretty good for me recently, which is a weird feeling considering that I personally know so many people that are struggling right now. But another thing is that all of these industries are all internet-based industries that have been growing at a rate of at least 25% per year over the last decade, even before this pandemic started. And that is why what I believe that this crisis is really doing is speeding up the Amazonification of the economy. What I mean by that is that even when life returns back to normal, there will still likely be a giant chunk of the population who will never go back to retail stores. They will only be ordering delivery from now on, and will be watching more online video content and playing more video games than before. And what this means is, unfortunately, many brick and mortar business owners will be hurting a lot even after the lockdowns are lifted. But it also gives an opportunity for many aspiring business owners to start making money in the new economy. Currently, there are over 20,000 third-party sellers that make over $1 million per year on Amazon alone. And right now, many new third-party sellers are joining that $1 million revenue mark thanks to the increase in online shopping due to the pandemic. And I'm not talking about the sellers who are price gouging and selling hand sanitizer for $100 a bottle. I'm talking about those who are selling DIY tools or bidets or ebooks or some other item that people want to order online during the lockdowns. But there is a more common way that millionaires will be created from this pandemic. You see, another demographic of people who might build an empire from this crisis are those who have a little bit of cash in the bank and are willing to go big during the crisis. In 2008, during the bottom of the financial crisis, if you invested $10,000 in a generic ETF, then over the next 10 years, you would have seen your investment multiply by about 4 times its original value up until the start of 2020. Meaning that your $10,000 investment would have been worth roughly $40,000 if you kept that investment for just 12 years. Now imagine if you invested something much larger, like $100,000. That would have potentially turned into $400,000 and would have earned you on average $25,000 per year from this one investment alone. And yes, I understand that most people do not have $100,000 to invest right now, I get it. However, there are some opportunities upper middle class millennials out there that have been saving for years and might start investing in the stock market during this crisis right now. And I'm not saying that right now is the right time to invest in the stock market. That is for you guys to decide. But what I am saying is that during times of crisis, those that have a little bit of money saved up all of a sudden have a golden opportunity to invest their money at a massive discount. So they will likely get a significant return on investment that might take them from middle class to the millionaire class over the next decade or two. And the stock market is not the only place where millionaire investors will be made. You see, with tens of millions of people losing their jobs, many of those are unfortunately also homeowners, some of whom will no longer be able to pay their mortgage any longer because they don't have a major source of income anymore. And we are already seeing evidence of this, as some lenders have reported 6 to 7 times their normal customer service call volumes. And some mortgage companies like Caliber Home Loans are preparing for a mortgage crisis that could be 40 to 50% worse than the 2008 crisis. And keep in mind, the average home price decreased by 20% during the financial crisis, with many areas seeing 30 to 40 income were able to purchase real estate at an extreme discount. And a lot of these people were just purchasing properties for themselves to live in, which just by chance ended up turning into a good investment for them because home prices have increased by roughly 55% since the 2008 crash. And in some locations, like my hometown of Oakville, Ontario, we have seen an increase in real estate value by over 100% during the last 12 years. Meaning that just by buying a home at the right place and at the right time during a crisis can accidentally take you from a middle class level of wealth to a millionaire level of wealth. But many people also began building real estate empires during the 2008 financial crisis as well, because many aspiring investors all of a sudden could qualify to purchase their first rental property due to the massive reduction in prices and interest rates. And there has been a litany of stories about people becoming real estate moguls because of the 2008 crash. All you really have to do is go onto some real estate forums or listen to podcasts like Bigger Pockets podcast to hear just how many people became millionaires or even multi-millionaires because of the 2008 crash. So I've covered many of the key industries that will end up turning some people into millionaires, multi-millionaires, or maybe even billionaires. Now I'd like to ask you guys, what are your financial plans for this crisis? And what do you think is going to happen to certain industries during this time? Let me know in the comments down below. We also just hit 150,000 subscribers, so I'd like to thank...
Oops. All right, so I will put in the show notes who this person is. I'm actually running out of some space here to keep filming, and it's true. This is the time to invest. This is the time to plan for the future. Like, who doesn't want 10 years is going to come no matter what happens? Why not let it come winning? And I appreciate anyone and everyone who's taking a moment to listen to what I have to offer on this YouTube channel. And you are very appreciated. This is not, I feel like I should just keep going down 8th Avenue until the space runs out. Harlem. So we started driving from 8th Avenue in the 30s. Oh, no, that's not true. We were on 6th Avenue. We made the left on 42nd Street. And then we made the right turn on 8th Avenue. So we've been driving from 42nd Street all the way past the Columbus Circle on 57th Street. And then we made more of the right, passing, staying on the Central Park West. And now we're on Frederick Douglass. This is Harlem. So 8th Avenue turns into Frederick Douglass. And all that happened around 110th Street. So we are in Harlem. And Harlem appears to be a lot more alive than anywhere else in this town. And let me tell you, we drove by many, many homes. People were home. Lights were on. People were home. And these are the projects right here. Some of the finest women in New York come right out of these projects. Woo-wee, Lord have his mercy. And then, of course, this is the spot where you get fish. The lighthouse. Not a lot of social distancing. We got double parked cars on both sides of the block for the lighthouse. All right, relax, relax, relax. Double parked cars on both sides of the street for the lighthouse. My boy Charlie is open. Let me show you Charlie's real quick. We have time. It's a good friend of mine. Me and Charlie go way back. Yeah. Get a chance to go here. Get you some fried chicken. Charlie knows how to make some fried chicken that'll have you going, wow. So, but the lighthouse is what creates all that double park and triple park cars over here. It's a fish and chip spot. You pick the fish, they steam it, they fry it. It's no joke. This is my family spot right here. My dudes. That went out of business. 135th Street. My boy used to have a Quiznos over here. The Jamaican hot pot is popping on 135th. That's good to see. Taking you on an 8th Avenue tour. You know, this is a time where, you know, the guy that I played was much more positive than the way I would have come out. I don't know how positive I can be at the moment when I think about stuff that he didn't talk about, which is the Federal Reserve telling all their bankers, like, hey, you guys don't have to give us any money. You can just loan out whatever comes in, you can put out there. And the more the stock market crashes, that basically means that the people that borrowed money and all their companies that fail because of the stock market, they then will probably have to get bailed out. So if anybody knows about Capital One Bank was bailed out recently, like a few days ago. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes where businesses are taking your money, lending it to people that are not going to be able to ever pay them back. They know they're not going to ever get paid back, and they don't care because they can just get bailed out. Whereas me, if my business fails, which has happened to me before, no one is there to bail me out. No one is there to say, hey, buddy, I see that you're just light on some capital. Let me put this $50,000 in your account just to help you get through the next season. No one is doing that to me, where they're doing that to the bankers. The bankers are getting, instead of $50,000 that a small business would need, these bankers are getting probably 1.2, 1.3. You know, when you leave the city and you're driving around and you head to like what looks like almost like the country, but it's really not. And as you're driving, you look to the left real quick and you see this house, and the house looks like, oh my God, how many people can live there? Those houses, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's just all like trees all in the way, but then you get that quick glimpse. And you're only 15 minutes away from the city. And there's these huge houses, and you wonder who the hell lives in these houses. Well, those houses are the bankers and their family and their children and their children's friends, and that's the life that they're living. They're not worried. They have so many homes all over, right surrounding all the cities, all these suburbs. And I'm not talking about little tiny hard-working people that make $125,000 a year. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the person who's making $4 million a year. It takes $2,700 and like let's say $2,800 a day makes you $1 million a year. These people are making $2,700 every 5-6 hours, and there are tons of them. We're not talking about a handful. We're talking about tons of them, and they play your money. They move your money around, and now the feds said they don't even have to have anything to the side for you. So I'm worried about hyperinflation. I'm worried about the bubble that's going to pop. This guy seems very optimistic. I personally am not that optimistic, not like he is, and I just hope that. See, I wish I had a better view. This freaking police just disturbing my. This is the Polo Grounds right now. We're in the Polo Grounds in Harlem. And to the left, to the right is the Rucker Park. Come on, buddy. Come on. Let's move your truck. Are we in a movie? Something about to happen? What's going on here? Look, there's a lady right here with her kid, and she's like doesn't even realize there's a truck backing up towards her. She doesn't even see it. She's like, I'm waiting for the bus. He better figure it out. She saw him. She just didn't care. So that was the Rucker Park, and on this side is the Polo Grounds right here, where ASAP Rocky, ASAP Ferg, all those ASAP guys, allegedly are from over this area. And this is where the original Yankee Stadium was as well. The original Yankee Stadium was here. Trying to get a better angle. And now that's the end of 8th Avenue. Now this is the Harlem River Drive. And that bridge you see right there is what they call High Bridge. That's High Bridge. Remember where those, that gang jumped that kid? And they hit him in the neck with a machete? And they were saying how he was from High Bridge Park. It was like those, I can't remember the name of the gang. And that's the bridge that you would take in the stores, like a block or two away from that bridge right there. That's all lit up all beautifully. Yeah, man. I love this town. I love this city. To the left of this bridge leads to it's under construction. It's hard to see,